welcome to the Internet of Senses Hearing podcast. My name is Tyler Heaton. I am a sound designer and researcher in the Spatial Technologies Applied Research and Training Center at Lethbridge College, where I specialize in the implementation of spatial media and technology in immersive experience design. Today is our second hearing podcast, and we are pleased to be joined by Idan Meir about his vision for the accessible world and RightHear, a game-changing app for people facing spatial orientation challenges. Idan is an entrepreneur based in Rockville, Maryland, with a passion for making the world more accessible. As CEO and co-founder of RightHear, a Techstars portfolio company, Meir has helped develop an advanced accessibility solution that empowers people with visual impairments to navigate public spaces independently. Originally from Israel, and having been molded by the can-do attitude of the startup nation, Idan is driven by the motto, aim for the moon, if you miss, you might hit a star. And he continues to drive RightHear forward in its mission to make the world more accessible, one building at a time. Idan, thank you for joining us today.
My very, very pleasure. Thank you for having me, Tyler.
We're going to jump right in. Really excited to hear about RightHear and this innovative approach to orientation. Starting off, what inspired you to create this solution? What was your motivation?
Yeah, so thank you for the invitation being here. I'm a bit excited. So I think it was about 6 years ago when we started RightHear, Gil and myself. Gil is a good friend of mine. RightHear's co-founder and CTO. We started about 6 years ago. I need to say this first as to introduce myself. I have horrible orientation skills. I'm that type of person that always get lost. This friend where when you go to travel somewhere, it's obvious that you need to turn right, but he's turning left, although you've been there just an hour ago. So that's me. I have really, really horrible orientation skills. And at the time we were thinking, well, if we'll be able to solve orientation challenges to those that have most severe orientation challenges, ultimately everyone would be able to go anywhere independently, freely, with ease. At the time, my grandfather turned to be blind, so that kind of influenced thinking about this audience unconsciously, and we started to talk about it with people from the community, and the reactions was amazing, really amazing about how big the need is. I was pretty sure that it might have already been solved for the blind visually impaired community. We've seen Braille signs many places we go, so I thought that's probably the solution. Soon to realize, and that's usually the two facts that I always share when talking about RightHear, so I'm happy to share it here with the audience as well. One is that really no matter where you go in the country, you can find Braille signs. Right, Taylor? I mean, it doesn't matter here in Maryland or if it's in Chicago or even really, it's all across the country. It doesn't matter if it's a small restaurant or if it's a big airport, if it's a hospital or if it's a museum. They are really there everywhere we go, usually in elevators, public restrooms, etc. So there are according to our research, over 100 million Braille signs. So that's the first fact. The other fact is that over 90%, even 95% out of the blind community cannot read Braille at all. And that was the point where hold on, what? That's a surprising fact that a lot of time when I still share it with people, they're really? Is that right? I had no idea. And for the 5-10% who can read Braille, finding the signs, right, is a challenge by itself. Because, okay, assuming you know to read it, you need to know where the sign is. And in the past 3 years, specifically since COVID-19, even if you know to read Braille, and even if you've been lucky to find the sign, you do not necessarily want to touch it anymore. It's a public surface. Mm-hmm. So today is even clearer to me than it was when we started that having an audio format of signage is just needed. It's needed not just for the blind and visually impaired community. It's needed for all of us. And I say all of us because sometimes it could be just a language barrier. Right? You might see the sign, but you cannot necessarily understand it because you don't speak the language. Or you know what? It could be a cognitive disability where you might see the sign, but you have, challenges with reading, as a dyslexia or something like that, or other cognitive disabilities that hold you from actually consuming the information that is all around us every day, all day long, wherever we go. Having it in audio format, in your own language, in your own pace, that's, I think, what drives us. That's what still drives us today. It's ultimately providing people with a much higher level of independence. Independence is a core value in my life. I'm a big believer in that and the importance of that. I think it's people's right It's people's right to feel that independence. And one of our first users, Tali, which I always shout out to her in interviews, is she used to call it's a sense of freedom. Talking about senses here, the podcast. So I love this term for what it gives her. It's a sense of freedom, knowing that you can do it by yourself. So that's what this is the way.
Amazing. And many people might not realize you said 2016. So 6 years you've been available, you've been out there. You mentioned that when you first started looking into the solution that, you thought maybe there's got to be solutions out there already. There's got to be people out there already. Were you surprised with what you found? I mean, I was surprised to hear about the percentage of people that don't read Braille, and that was quite surprising to me. Were you surprised by what you found, and what makes you different than what was available even in the app ecosystem?
Right. So I was surprised that there's not a lot of options. There were at a time there were almost no options. I mean, there were a few options available. Some of them were really low tech, and I'm talking about actual speakers with RFID type of band that you need to kind of something that could, like, even in theory couldn't scale. I think the others would be mainly focused on outdoors, as GPS was already around, which was great. Some of these apps are still available. Well, we're in great touch, and I have a lot of respect to everyone in this ecosystem. But I was mainly surprised by the fact that there's not a lot of options. Right. Then I think we started the company in 2016, but we actually launched it in 2017, again in Israel. At the time, there were, I think, in 2018-ish, there were a bit more companies, more apps that popped up next to us with different focus, and we also kind of sharpened our focus along the way. As of today, I think what's really boiled down to us of our understanding of this space is that while most of the other alternatives are focusing on navigation, our focus is on orientation. Now, for the listeners, might asking themselves, what's the big difference? Like, it's all wayfinding, there's different wording, there's different semantics. What's the big deal? There's a huge deal here. Navigation, if to try to distinguish, right? Navigation is taking you from point A to point B, right? As a turn by turn. So let's say I want to visit Tyler's office. So turn right, turn left, turn right, turn left, turn right, turn left. You've arrived. That's navigation. That's not, by the way, what's RightHear is doing. We do have some navigation features in the outdoors, but in the indoor environment, we're not offering that, right? We're offering orientation. So what is orientation? Orientation is just knowing where you are, knowing what is there, knowing what's around you, and consuming the special information about the space in the context of where you are currently at. That's what our focus is. By the way, it's not better than navigation or worse than it's just two different things. Sometimes you do have a certain task where you need to visit Tyler, you need to get to his office. So navigation would be great. In other cases, you not necessarily want to navigate there. You just want to experience the building and know what's around, right? Oh, there's an ATM here. Oh, there's a coffee shop over there. Great. Obviously, the orientation information allows you to navigate places. So I'm a sighted person. So sighted people basically navigate the world based on the understanding of the environment. So they think, oh, there's a door there. It's my lead somewhere. Let's go there. Oh, there's an elevator there. They might have a directory next to it. Then we'll see the next, hint of where to go. Mm-hmm. So that's how we sighted people basically well, there are specific places that have indoor navigation tools, but that's still rare. And it's rare for a reason. And the reason it's rare is because as of today, it's still a huge challenge. Providing a good indoor navigation experience is a huge, huge challenge, not just from the technological standpoint, but from the economical standpoint as well, right? So there are great technology that I came across with indoor navigation. Almost always the problem is when it's come to economics, and then, oh, hold on, do we need to spend so much, like it's from a facility standpoint, so much on providing that type of experience? You know what, maybe we don't need that. Our philosophy, or my philosophy, is that everyone should be able to feel and be independent wherever they go, just equally to anyone else. If me as a sighted person, I have the visual signs around me, it just feels right if the possibility and the technology and the economics is there to provide it, again, in an audio format for those who might need that this way. So focusing on orientations helps us to deploy and grow much faster. It's required way less of infrastructure, way less of mapping, positioning efforts. And it also requires way less of money involved. It's
Mhm.
just much more affordable.
I do a lot of work in immersive technology and spatial technologies, and there's a lot of talk about these wayfinding solutions that are going to be on your glasses, and they'll show you lines on the ground and all that kind of stuff. But that relies on certain technologies to be in place. And so I want to go back to a comment that you made about inside is more challenging than outside, and the technologies that are involved. So there's sort of two things that you touched on that I think are important to explore. And one is that the technologies are different
Right.
to do interior wayfinding, navigation, and orientation, and also that there needs to be the will by companies and organizations to do that. So can you talk a little bit about sort of both those challenges? Maybe we'll
Yes.
explore both those challenges. So start with what makes it so challenging for interior wayfinding and orientation.
Well, great point. I'm glad you brought it up. I think that the biggest problem isn't with the technology. It might be
Mhm.
surprising by itself, but again, with the motivation or drive behind it. I always say that when I had opportunities to talk that technology is already accessible, but we as society aren't enough. We as society aren't accessible as we can be. But I'll start with the technology and then go to that. I think the even bigger picture there with the technology, with thinking about interior places and wayfinding in general. So you need to basically have two main components. One is the mapping, which is a challenge by itself because it's not available as it is outside with whatever Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps or other databases. Indoors, you need to have some sort of collaboration with the facility that has that. Otherwise, you need to map it somehow. So that's the mapping component is a challenge. Not always it's available. You think about old buildings, or not always it's accurate because they've been done. Like, there's different challenges with the mapping itself. And then the second challenge is the positioning. So assuming we do have a great map of the building, now we need to know exactly where you are at the building, because right, in order to tell you if to go right or to go left. By the way, when offering a navigation experience, that's become even a bigger challenge because now it's really critical that we know exactly where you are very accurately. Back to the orientation aspect, well, as long as you're around the entrance area, well, guess what? You're still at the entrance area. It doesn't really matter if you're one step to the right or one step to the left. You're still at the entrance, right? So that's part of the challenges, I would say, or the biggest challenge with indoor. And again, once you have the mapping and positioning, then it's become also the challenge of building the algorithm behind it that was maintained. But in routing, you need to go from A to B, and then from A to C, and then from B to C, and then from B to A. Like there's a lot of routing going on. This was just 3 points at the building. Think about 100. Like it's just so much. But I think the bigger picture, the biggest challenge is actually not from the technological standpoint. It's from the drive and the motivation behind, and the economics. That's kind of part of it, right? In my opinion, as I said before, I think that's people's right first and foremost. People has the right to access independently everywhere. Period. Right? That's why we have ramps everywhere we go. Think about it. It's not just to improve our customer experience for people with wheelchair using wheelchair. It's because it's the law, and it's the law because we want to provide equal experience. We want to provide equality and inclusion. I believe personally that it's just a matter of time until our industry will realize that it's like a requirement. When looking into the Braille signs we mentioned earlier, the reason they're out there is because of the ADA. And when reading the ADA, you realize that the goal is to provide effective communication. And hold on, is it effective? So that's the type of questions that now is started to be asked, and I believe just a matter of time until the awareness behind it or around it will increase. As of today, I think most of our partners work with us. Some of them work because of their interest to improve their ADA compliance, for sure. Others truly do that because they care and they want to provide really a better inclusive experience at their facilities. Some are doing that from an image standpoint or a marketing standpoint. At the beginning, I must say I really hated that. Today, I feel like, well, as long as they're doing the right thing, I don't really care what their motivations are. And there are even cases where we help them save money. And you can think about places where if someone from their staff need to guide and ask the person who's blind around the facility, the campus or airport or whatever that is, that's dollars that we can save you if you allow them to do it independently.
I agree. I mean, so many assistive technologies, so many technologies. As you say, the technology is the easy part.
Right.
The will to implement the technology is the challenge, and for different reasons.
From a facility standpoint, I hope that businesses will start to realize that accessibility is not a feature, it's people's right.
Yeah. And I think if you don't have a mobility challenge or a vision or a hearing impairment, it's hard to understand that perspective. I think there needs to be more awareness around that so people can understand that right to freedom, that right to be able to have an accessible environment without a barrier-free environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe I want to add one more point in here. Tyler, because you were asking about the technology and the different challenges there. One of the things I hearing myself saying again and again since 2017 and 18, because there's been a lot of discussion. Oh, should it be with beacons, without beacons? Should it be with LiDAR, without LiDAR? Should it be this way, but it should be standard? One thing I always say that I can almost guarantee is that technology will continue to evolve. Like today is this technology, tomorrow is that technology. Like we see what's happening with AI. We might talk about it also later, but technology will continue to evolve. What won't change is the need behind it and the fact that it's the right. And therefore, I think what's important, at least in our thinking, is making sure that the principles behind this technology are the right principles. So for example, privacy. In our case, the app is completely private. There's no sign in. Like we don't know who our users are, which is a huge challenge for us as developers. We don't know like nothing. There's no sign in the app. So we don't all of you are downloading the app, please do that. We won't know you're doing that. Like we have no idea from where and what age and what. So privacy is one, independence, meaning that it has to be with no human in the loop. It's completely independent. You're doing it by yourself. That's it. Nobody is in that loop. I think that's, again, a principle that's important to us in order to provide this, again, sense of freedom that you've done it by yourself. Thirdly is the fact that it should be completely free to the end user. I mentioned the ramp before. Tyler, you see a lot of things. Have you ever seen a person in a wheelchair paying for a ramp?
I hope never to.
No. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I don't think that people need to pay for the world to be accessible. It's our duty as society. So it's 100% free and anonymous, again, for our users. Always has been, always will be. It has to be, again, and that's also, I think, accessibility. Giving it out for free, it's part of accessibility, like financial accessibility. It's both platform because it's important, because again, we want to provide it to everyone in as many languages as possible. So yeah, I mean, these type, and we have more, but this is, I think, some of the main principles that when looking or thinking about what type of solution to use as a user or to install as a facility to look at.
I'd like to talk a little bit about, what the user experience is like for people using the app and how you designed that user experience. What were some of the insights that you gained by talking with people in your own family, talking with people with ADA and different organizations? How did you develop that user experience, and what is it like for a user?
So maybe I'll describe it, and then how do we develop it or continue developing it? From a user perspective, again, it's a free app, Android and iPhone. Once downloaded, you can find in the app. So there are two main modes in the app. One is the outdoor mode, which everyone can start using wherever they are. You can think about it, again, this is a improved or accessibility featured type of Google Maps, if you will, but with accessibility by design, not as an afterthought. So we build it with accessibility by the design. And there, there's different unique features that we've put into the experience there that allows users, mainly users who are blind or visually impaired, to navigate and acquire better orientation outdoors wherever they are. That's the outdoor mode. For the indoor mode, so our users can find in the app what locations are accessible for them in their area. Once they find that space, the app can simulate them that location, so they can build a mental map of the space before even going there. Again, that's reduce the anxiety and build the confidence to actually go there. Then the app will usually ask you, how would you like to get there, whether it's by walk or just have integrations with Uber, Lyft, and all the other public transport apps. And then once you're actually arriving to the facility, the app will start giving you answers to the next three questions. One is, where am I? So you are at the main entrance to Hyatt Hotel or whatever that is. Secondly is, what is here? So in retail, again, a lot of times the answer would be the open hours. right? So welcome to whatever, Walmart. The open hours are Monday to Friday, right? Or that could be a concert hall. Today in the concert, there's this band or whatever that is. So where am I? What is here? Third is what's around me. No matter where the user is pointing with his smartphone 360 degrees around him, he will be able to hear what is there in what distance, right? So to one direction, you might hear restrooms. This direction, 50 feet, ladies on the left, gentlemen on the right. And you point another direction, might be elevators. In this direction, 30 feet. Yeah, I mean, there's a few more features. Like maybe I'll mention one or two. One is a call for local assistant. So if it's a big campus usually, and you need some sort of help at that facility anyway, that's fine. It's okay to ask. There's a push of a button there, which you can just tap on and have a phone call with the relevant person at the facility. So not going to headquarters or somewhere far, just someone at the facility on the east side of the campus, for example, will be able to, answer and try to help. Another one is our integrations with different object recognitions apps like Envision and Be My Eyes, Seeing AI, Cash Reader, all of these great apps that are out there. So you can basically pull them up directly from the RightHear app. We have many more to say, but to your second part, how do we design and develop on this? So we work very closely with the community, especially in Israel, where we started. We have a very strong beta group there. We've hired people who are blind and visually impaired multiple times. And we are working really closely with the different nonprofit organizations. I can mention the Lighthouse Guild, the Columbia Lighthouse for the Blind in DC, the National Federation of the Blind, which we installed a system there, and a few others. I think one of our efforts right now these days is really building up our community here in North America. So for all of you listening to this episode so far and interested to see how you can be helpful, and you can more than you might think, please contact us. I hope that the details will be later. But I always say it's not an app, it's a movement. We're really building a movement. We're trying to build and design a movement of people who cares about accessibility in the built environment where we're still living in. Most of the focus is just on digital. So, I mean, that's important, that's right. But we're still walking and going places.
Yeah, I think I want to jump right to that idea about the details, because one of the things that I initially thought when you were talking about the challenges of mapping a building or a location is who does that mapping? So if somebody says, yeah, we want to map our Walmart or we want to map our campus, is it volunteers? Is it the organization? How do people get involved to make that map that gets turned into that, as you put it, which is the audio format signage?
Yep. So it's all begins with a request, with a need, right? Someone raise a hand and say, hey, I'd like that space to be accessible. It can tell us about it. You can tell the business about it. You can do it both, either way. But we say, hey, we want that place to be accessible. When that happens, we usually get into a call with this facility. And then I always say, it was super complicated to build something super simple. I think that we got into, and there's still place and room to simplify it even more. But when we talk to a facility, all we ask from them is just the floor plan of the building or the evacuation plan, which is just public info anyway. They probably have it on the door and on the walls anyway. So we ask this type of floor plan. That helps us to identify the main points of interest at the building: entrances, intersections, restrooms, elevators, things like that. That's also help us to understand what would be a scope of a project in that case. Again, if it's an airport or if it's a McDonald's restaurant, again, depends what it is. In many of our projects, and we currently have over 2,500 locations worldwide. The reason we have so many is because, again, we really simplified the process. In many of the cases, we just send them a kit. That's how the kit looks like. It's basically a box with a very short installation guide of how to install it themselves. I'm kind of showing it also to the camera right here. It's a three pages kind of guide that shows, how to go on a ladder safely and stick the beacon on the wall safely. Obviously, there are, the beacons there. I have it here. Yeah. I'll show the beacon as well. Having the beacons, 1 or 2 or 3 or 50 or whatever that is in that box. And lastly, there's the badge in that box. The badge of the place is accessible with our QR code to download it. Installation is very simple. It takes us, in our biggest projects, it takes us a day or two. And talking about airports, like really big campuses, sometimes maybe even a day or two more. For a small, again, shop, that's within half an hour. basically, and you're done. So yeah, I think, I mean, it starts with a request. One of the things I'm happy to share with you, Tyler, and that's very new, planning to, to announce it very soon, but it's currently on beta right now in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So for those of you who are there, give it a shot. Is our Unlock project, our on program. The Unlock program basically simplify the request part. So users can actually request from businesses in their or any other entities, organizations in their area to take a look at that and see for themselves if it's something they want to consider. So as I said before, it's a movement. We're building a movement. We won't be able to do it ourselves. We need to have the community with us in order to increase the awareness, build more references, and ultimately having that as a market standard.
Yeah. No, I think that's amazing. It's great because you've answered a few of my my other questions about this. So it's really good. So I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about sound and how does sound fit into this spectrum of assistive technologies, because this is a hearing podcast. We, yes, there are multiple senses and we know that we use all of those senses together, but sound in that spectrum of assistive technology for visually impaired, where does that fit, and what is its advantage?
Yeah, great question. Some of the use we do with sound is just different cues for the user experience, knowing what is that the app is currently doing or what's happening with the user experience there. Give you an example, in our outdoor experience, once you're actually arriving to your destination, there's some sort of like a clapping. Oh, I've made it. You've reached your destination. This is a cue that you've arrived. I think one of the things to maybe focus is the audio descriptions work by itself. So think about it, Tyler. Like we're all familiar with audio descriptions of movies, right? We're all, like, and there are experts in that, the professionals who do the describing movies for people, again, who are blind or visually impaired, right? But what about describing the environment? So, and I'll give you just a few examples, right? I always do that when I talk in-person type of event. Like I ask someone from the crowd, hey, do you want to try to describe to me how to get from here to the exit door? And there's one type of description. Then I ask someone else, and there's a whole different type of description. And then like you can say it in so many different words, right? Are you saying feet? Are you saying meters? Are you saying steps? Right? What do you want to put in and what's not? Like how informative you want to be, but then again, not too much so someone can actually consume it. So there's a lot of challenges with describing the environment with audio. Again, we've been contributing and as of today, still sticking to a global standard that's been made on this by Wayfinder. It's a nonprofit initiative that's been done in the UK. But yeah, I think that's for the hearing or sound audio aspect of our work.
As a seen person, as a sighted person, when I'm navigating or orienting in an environment, I'm using visual cues. I'm looking around. There's a lot of visual noise, but I'm able to focus in on things, filter that. My
Exactly
filters that. With someone who is visually impaired, they're already using their hearing, potentially proprioception, to find those cues. How does your solution overcome that noise that would be offset by visual cues while adding more information in? How do you overcome sort of like cognitive load or filtering that?
A huge challenge, to be honest. It's a huge challenge. One way to do that is, again, users' preferences and personalization of the experience. Some of our users want to hear more than others. So it's a bit of what the user actually, and sometimes it's the same user, but it's just in a different mode right now. So right now it's just not in too much in descriptions of the different exhibits in that area, but just to know a little bit about where the main things are. In other cases, again, the opposite. So giving user the flexibility and preferences setting, we're improving that over again and again in different versions we're releasing. So that's one way to address this challenge. Secondly is with the descriptions themselves. At the beginning, I remember we were starting, we were very descriptive. We thought that the more descriptive we'll be, the better user experience will be. They'll have better understanding of the environment. That was the thinking. Again, because of the cognitive overload, we realized that's not really true. If we can keep it short, really short, like restrooms, 50 meter, and wherever he's pointing, he knows what are we referring to. That's actually better than saying to the restrooms, continue in this direction for 50 meters. It might sound silly, the difference, but it's a big one when you're in a crowded environment. The more locations we're adding, the more cases we're building, the more users that give us these feedbacks. And as I said before, it's a challenge by itself because we don't know who our users are. So for us, we cannot just contact you. Hey, how was your experience at that coffee shop earlier today? No, we cannot do that even if we want to do. It's really voluntarily on users that cares and understanding what we're trying to do to provide these feedback and joining our beta groups.
So are there any other parts to it that combine with the audio? Because they're using anything like haptics or anything like that to act as cues with the mobile device?
A little bit of haptics, but I wouldn't say like too much as of today. We're planning to do that. One of the things we've actually had, and we took it off. We might add it back again. So for those who've been using it, bear with us. But what the 3D sound, we had that in the app for the audio, so you can really hear where the different points of interest according to your stereophone headset. We took it out just because there was not much of usage of it. I guess most of our users didn't understand what to do with that. And those who were trying was, I think, confusing them more than it was helpful to them, unfortunately. So that didn't really stick, unfortunately. It was a cool concept. I think it's still a cool concept, but it didn't stick. I think, by the way, Soundscape done a really good job there. We have another one we do have is like different gestures. So I'm currently holding the smartphone horizontally, right? If you're taking the phone vertically to the ground, it's changed also the functioning of it. So we do play with this, the tilting of the smartphone. When you do this vertically to the ground, it's basically turned to the sky mode, as we call it, which is basically, again, trying to describe all the features, is letting you know if you're getting out of your route. So if you say you want to go to the north and it's at 200 meters or far away, you want to make sure you're still going north and not just northeast all of a sudden, because again, it's a long distance. So sky mode help you with that. That's for our more advanced, I would say, users.
So you said over 2,500 accessible locations already. You've got some pretty big partners, folks like Microsoft, some bigger airports, McDonald's, those sorts of things. Who else is using RightHear that you maybe want to give a shout out to?
Wow. Well, Pizza Hut, all of Pizza Hut in Israel, Aroma, which is like the Israeli Starbucks. There are more airports right now that are in depth negotiations and discussions with here. You mentioned Microsoft and McDonald's. The Israeli parliament, again, we've been mainly there in Israel. So I think, there we have really great projects in almost in all sectors. Here in North America, some already installed that, but I think the bigger brands are now finally starting picking it up. It just takes longer, bigger corporates and bigger processes. I think, again, we've made it very simple, and we're keen to make it even simpler than that. We're planning to announce a few exciting announcements at the beginning of next year. So stay tuned with that to make it even easier, even simpler, both to our users as well as to the facilities. Keeping the facilities in mind is very crucial to us, not just because this is where our business model is. Yes, we are charging facilities with a very reasonable subscription fee. We're keeping them in mind because ultimately, to make the impact we're trying to make, it has to be everywhere. It couldn't be only at the, Microsoft or specifically brand, specifically hotels that has it. Oh, it has to be everywhere you go. Just like ramps are everywhere and braille signs are everywhere. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, it's a movement, not a not a feature. It's a right.
Exactly. Join the movement. Listeners are listening. Join the movement.
Audio format signage, is it for more people than just those with visual impairment?
Absolutely. And we've touched that a little bit earlier. Think about, again, different cognitive disabilities. One of them I mentioned earlier is dyslexia. You might see the sign, but you cannot necessarily read it. It could be other cognitive disabilities, right? Even dementia that's that cause to of a lack of orientation. It could be a language barrier, which again, I think is kind of everyone has some language barrier. I've been to a few years ago into a Chinese airport. That was tough. That was tough. Or even mental. One of the things that was surprising to me, Tyler, was learning that there was a doctor from a mental clinic in New York who contacted us and said, I'm recommending this to some of my patients. They're like, excuse me, doctor, are you from mental clinic? Again, yes. So why are you recommending it to them? Just so I can understand, why are you doing that? Well, he said, well, some of my patients have agoraphobia, which is a fear of big public spaces. Knowing where they are, knowing what is there, what's around it, knowing that they can call someone for help, reduce the anxiety. Who knew? Like who knew? Like I didn't know about it at all. So we're learning about more and more audiences that find value in this. And maybe I know we're almost off time, but another aspect maybe worth mentioning, being an Israeli-based startup and everything going on in the world right now, is emergency cases. Think about it. Every room in every hotel in North America, or at least in the US, on the back side of it, you have the evacuation plan, where to go in case of fire or in case of emergency. Yeah, but how can you consume that if you cannot see? You just don't. So if there's a fire in the hotel, figure it out.
Yeah.
So like wayfinding as also liability and emergency aspect to take in consideration, which a lot of time just been overlooked.
Yeah, and many kinds of emergencies. I mean, blackouts, smoke, any of those sort of situations where suddenly you need that assistance, but you cannot see. What if you can't find the sign? What if the door is knocked down?
Exactly.
Right? Like you're right, there's a lot of situations there where having audio signage means could be saving a life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the fact that it's available, it's accessible, it's reasonable, it's easy, it's simple. I think it really is a matter of increasing awareness. And again, thanks to you this stage, I'm happy I can talk about it and amplify it to more people. And hopefully some of the listeners will take action and contact us and do something with this in order to increase awareness. The more references, the more awareness, the more we'll talk about it, the more we'll shift a bit, not all, but a bit of the digital accessibility that is mainly discussed to the built environment, the more accessible places we'll see.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left, so I wanted to ask you two more questions, and they might tie together.
Sure.
So I'm going to start with the first one, and then I'll ask the second one, and I think they'll probably flow together. There's a lot of technology that's a part of your solution. AI has been everywhere the last few years. I see you smiling there.
Yep.
Is AI something that you're looking into? Is it a part of your solution? And I guess kind of going along with that and a little bit separated, but what is your ultimate vision for RightHear and for the solution?
So with the AI part, absolutely. I mean, that's I've heard a lecture earlier. What trends are there right now in the tech world? Well, there's no trends. There's one trend called AI. So we're definitely recognizing that and looking into that and developing with that. There's a few opportunities with that. We've seen great example with AI and Be My Eyes recently. That was very out loud there, and kudos to them for this adoption of the technology so early. So from object recognition, in order to identify what's the object I'm currently holding or whatever that is, from an orientation or wayfinding standpoint, we've discussed earlier the challenge of describing the environment. Right. So think how ChatGPT can be helpful in that aspect. We talked about the challenge of increasing their awareness and reaching out to businesses with, trying this and looking into this. Again, AI there could also be implemented, and also with understanding of the map. You can now also upload pictures to ChatGPT or to different AI engines. They can actually understand some of them. What if we'll, upload some of these maps? What could that hold? So we're definitely looking into that. We're working with that. We're planning a few major, again, as I said, announcements for next year. And from a vision standpoint, again, I think it's, as I said before, it's not a feature, it's people's right. That's what drives us. We've been around, as I said, 6 years. So we faced COVID as a company, right? As a crisis. We're facing the current crisis in Israel. So, half of our team is currently on reserve duty. It's really is a challenging time for us. What's holds us behind it is understanding that there are people out there that needs it. There are people out there that are relying on this. I actually know people that, as they tell me, I'm not leaving mainly in Israel where we're mainly deployed, I'm not leaving my house without the RightHear open and fully charged. That's kind of a bit of a criticism. Yes, we know the battery issue. We know that. But people are relying on this, and that's a huge drive. That's a huge drive of our work. So, our vision that within end of the century, if you will, that's what we have 6 years until 2030. Our goal is to have at least 100,000 locations accessible. There's much more buildings than that, but at least we'll hit that milestone. Well, having your facility accessible with an audio format signage is an obvious thing to have. It's not something you'd be proud of. Just like having your website accessible is obvious. No company, hey, look at our website, it's even accessible. Of course it is. And there's nothing to be proud of. This is the expectation. So we hope to get into a point where knowing that the facility is accessible with an audio format signage is the common expectation. That's the vision.
Absolutely. No, it's inspirational to hear you talk about this movement, to hear you talk about, the right to be able to be out in the environment, to have accessibility. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been a great conversation. I wish you all the best with the future of RightHear. It just is really an excellent app, and I hope more people discover it through this podcast and share it with people that they know, and also with businesses and organizations that can implement this to make the world a more accessible place.
Absolutely. So, I mean, again, to the listeners, shoot us an email. It could be even to me personally. We want to hear from you. We want to work with you. We want to join you to this movement. I'm at Idan at RightHear, IDAN at RIGHT -hear, HEAR.com. Hopefully it will be in the footnotes as well. Tyler, thank you so much for the opportunity in this stage. I do not take it for granted. This is really helpful, and this is part of this movement.
Great. Thank you, Idan. All the best to you.